All right. Before we jump into this video, it is a long one, but I think it's pretty fun. I just talk a bunch about film cameras and stuff. If you like that kind of thing, make sure to subscribe to the channel because that's kind of what I do here. Appreciate the support. Like the video as well if you did enjoy it. Feel free to join the channel as well. Like these beautiful members here, they've all joined. You get exclusive access to certain videos. You get early access to other videos and help me decide what videos I should make next and all sorts of other perks that I am constantly rolling out. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure to subscribe again, and I hope you enjoy this video. What is a modern film camera? Yay, I can write. What is a modern film camera? And more importantly, if I was tasked with the opportunity to design one, to create one, what would I do? How would I go about performing that function? There's a few things we have to look at. One would be, what audience do we want to try to reach? Okay, a few different schools of thought on this because what we're looking at is there's a lot of different camps. Okay, there's a lot of different camps to modern film photography, modern photography in general. So what do we want to do? Do we want to try to bring more people in, or do we want to try to appease the audience that currently exists? So if we wanted to bring more people in, I would probably say something like new to film, right? These are like people that would just be starting out. Maybe they've shot digital before, maybe they haven't. So my thought with that would be new to film. We want to do something that is affordable, medium quality, I would say. It doesn't have to be like the highest quality, because ultimately, like, if you're just getting into film, we kind of want something that is accessible, could have potential to grow with, but also not something that's like has all the different functions, all the different features, and all this stuff. So maybe something like a point and shoot system. I think there's a GoFundMe, I think it's like Film Never Die or something, has a GoFundMe point and shoot camera that's kind of designed similar to some of like the older Leica point and shoot cameras, which aren't great cameras because they're electrical, lots of issues, so on and so forth. But a modern version of that would be interesting because it does offer, you know, different modes at which you can shoot at. Fully auto, I think there's like a low light mode and stuff like that. Like, I think I could be incorrect, but something like maybe a Minolta TC1 or Canon QL17 would be another great example of something I'm kind of thinking of, where there's majority of manual functions, but there's also some auto features to make it easier. But it's something that like you can shoot with the auto, and then when you kind of figure out, I like shooting at this aperture, I like shooting at this shutter speed, you can kind of manipulate that to fit more of what you like. So that's kind of what I mean when I say medium quality, not like the highest tier where like everything is whatever, but just like something that's affordable, get people into it with room to grow. I think that's one of the big things that I would say personally. Room to grow. Room to continue to grow your love for film photography, because you want to bring people in. You can change everything about this. You can change what film you're shooting. You can choose the aperture. You can create so many different things with film photography. It's not just an expensive hobby. So this would be my thought there. For the new to film audience, something like a modern Canon at 28, compact, easier to carry around. Not the nicest thing in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but just something to kind of wet your beak, so to speak. So that's for the new to film. What we're going to do now is this is going to be tricky, because I think we saw this with the 17 rollout, with the Mint 35 AF rollout, with any of like the new film camera rollouts. There's a few different camps, and every one of them has very valid reasons for why they want the things that they want. So as I'm approaching this armed with the feedback that I had for the videos I was making about the 17 and others that I was seeing, some common thoughts, so on and so forth. So for film photography shooters, we'll say, / addicts, that's actually probably better. Affordability is a huge point as well, okay? And I know that's kind of like a dumb thing to say. I don't know what that entails, again, because I don't produce things. I just repair stuff, I buy stuff, whatever. So I don't really have the means in which to do the market research into what people want and the costs therein and like producing things on a large scale. I don't know those things. I really don't. What I do know is the market. I know I've talked to a lot of people who want to buy cameras and all this stuff. And yes, people are willing to drop money on stuff. But I think if you want to appeal to a wider audience, making something that's affordable would be nice. But then also, given that these are actually film photography shooters, if you're making a camera that kind of markets more to what they want, this doesn't really matter as much. You can sell it for a little bit more, meaning you can put more work into it, more money into it, and make a better product. So this doesn't matter as much, but this does. And so what do I mean by that? Because it's kind of like a blanket statement, right? Depending on the metrics in which you're measuring quality, that could mean anything. But what do I mean when I say high quality? I mean something that's durable, reliable, and at least meets expectations to some degree of what people are expecting. Realizing now I should have probably done this on a whiteboard, given that there's more surface area. In my mind, when I think of high quality, I think of few to no plastic components. I think of a lot of metal inner workings. I think of like returning back to like more of the basic fundamentals of film photography. There was a portion of my Pentax 17 critique video, which I don't think made it to the final edit because I kind of went down a little bit of a tangent, but I was kind of comparing it to a newer Pentax model that I've been kind of haphazardly working on. It's a mess right now, but this is like a later version. This is the MZM. This is a Pentax SLR camera, as you can tell. But you'll notice that it has very similar styling on the bottom to the Pentax 17. It has the same kind of like grandma gold color, and everything is kind of plastic internally. And I like these cameras because I think they're fun. They're lightweight, easy to move around with and stuff, but there's a lot of plastic components. There's a lot of electronics, and those things, again, are just kind of prone to failure over time. So my thought, my proposition would be something that's more mechanical, more durable, and just more basic. There's a lot of people out there that have conflicting opinions on what that should be. Some people really like the idea of having an autofocus camera. Other people don't. Some people want mechanical SLR. Other people don't. And this again goes kind of into this group all has different desires, different means. And I'm by no means saying that like the camera for me is going to be perfect for everybody. But this is just my idea behind what a modern film camera could/should be. High quality, if it is, doesn't necessarily need to be affordable. And again, if you're kind of meeting the standards of expectations that some people have, then the affordability doesn't matter too much. So we'll move on from that point. Should there be room to grow? Of course, that's kind of, again, a dumb thing, but there should be room to grow with the system. But I think basically what I'm proposing for modern film camera is an old film camera, okay? Hear me out. My thought for what a modern film camera should be, I think it should be, an SLR. My initial thought would be something that uses like a K-mount because that's what I have the most in, but honestly it doesn't really necessarily matter. I feel like the K-mount's a pretty universal system, and then also they do have the adapters for M42, which I think is good. But honestly what I have seen too is that there's modern cinema cameras that have interchangeable mounting units. I'm not really a great artist by any stretch of the imagination, so bear with me. And my circles are so bad. Anyway, so what we have here is interchangeable mounts. I don't know what the legality of that is, to be honest, but the great thing about this is it's a thought experiment, so none of this really matters. Interchangeable mounts, I think, would be fantastic. There's a lot that goes into that, obviously, because, for instance, the K-mount, I'm looking at one right here. There is an aperture resistor in here for that, so you need a little bit more to it than just like the actual mount here. Same thing with Olympus mounts, the OM, same thing with the SR Minolta mount, same thing with the Nikon F mount, all of these things. You wouldn't necessarily be able to maybe interchange them yourselves, But maybe when you order the camera, you would just like order what mount that you prefer, kind of thing. Because again, I think if we're trying to appeal to older film photographers or film photographers that are making their stuff, having some level of modification that they can make in order to make it work for their particular needs would be nice. It would raise the price a little bit more, but again, if you're kind of meeting their expectations, then that's good. Also, given the fact that you don't have to develop an actual lens grouping, that would probably lower the cost a little bit, because I don't know much about lens coating and stuff, but not cheap from what I know. We're gonna go down that rabbit hole. We'll make that for a different day. So interchangeable mounts, that would be my first thing. And then this is gonna be controversial as well, but manual focus. I don't like autofocus, okay? And that, again, is my personal opinion. I think if we're going to try to be returning to kind of the bare bones basics of film photography, it should be manual focus. And also, again, going back to the interchangeable mounts, dealing with an autofocus system, onboard motoring system, all of that would just be too much. It would add to the cost, and I think a lot of people could really care less if it is manual or autofocus. In fact, I think that more people would prefer it to be manual focus, given the fact that there's really good autofocus camera systems out there. Canon autofocus stuff, a lot of the Nikon autofocus stuff, the N80, N90, the F4 even, all of those things are, relatively speaking, dirt cheap cameras compared to their manual focus predecessors, such as the AE1 or the FM or the F3. Any of those go for so much more money than the autofocus option. So manual focus to me seems like it's much more of a sure thing. So manual focus lens system. This is something that the Pentax 17 had. Manual, advanced. They're better. They just are. There's just no two ways around that. So with that being said, it would also have a manual rewind, which I again think is better. Fewer electronics, fewer things to worry about. Perfect world, this would just have a metering system in it. Which brings us to the next point. How should the meter work? This is going to be a side version of it. So this would be your lens. Light comes in from here, from your image. Here is your mirror. This is also terrible, so like be kind, please. I'm not an artist, but anyway, so light comes in, right? And typically on things, there is the prism here, image comes in here, bounces up through there, through the viewfinder, and then there's typically little cells here. I would nix all of this. This is kind of an older idea, but I would nix all of this, and instead I would have this here. This is a sub-mirror. So basically what this would do is light would come in here, and it would still go in here, so you could look through the viewfinder, but would also reflect down into here and into here, which this is a very common system seen in something like an LX, something seen the F3, something seen in other similar cameras that have detachable prisms. Because a few things. Detachable prisms I think are great, not only just in terms of adding another option, adding another variation which you can shoot, but also, and this is important, for social media. Now, I kind of made fun of the Pentax 17 for catering to social media a little bit too hard, I thought, with the half frame thing. I do think that they were onto something. I think if you can make a camera that's marketable to a wider audience via social media, it makes more sense. Like that's where things are at. And there's those like reels, TikToks or whatever, of people with the waist level viewfinder taking the picture and all that stuff. That's what this would be. It just would be the same thing. So detachable prism means that you have to have your photoresistor down at the base of the camera here, which is fairly easy to do. It's been done many times before, and that way, again, you can remove the prism, thus taking those sorts of shots. And I don't know if it would necessarily interfere too much into the interchangeable mount portion of this, but the more I'm kind of thinking about it, the more realistic I think the interchangeable mount things would be. Obviously it would take a lot of work, R&D, all of those things, but I think it'd be cool. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. All of the speeds would be achieved without the need to have batteries in it, or without the need of power. It's just better. It's just better. I took a MX on a trip not too long ago, and it wasn't until I was like midway through the trip I realized I didn't even have batteries in the camera. I shot like a roll of film already, and I was loading my second one, And I had just been metering off of my phone because I was also shooting with my Bronica, so I always meter off my phone for that anyways. So I didn't really think too much about it. And then I realized, like, as I was shooting, I was like, oh, I don't have batteries in this, but I didn't need batteries. I could still use the camera. I like that idea because, you know, LR44 batteries, CR2 batteries, CR123As, 4 LR44s, PX625s, all of those batteries are kind of expensive. They're kind of hard to find sometimes, and like they're cheaper if you buy them online, but like if you're out and about and your camera dies and like you need to just go into a store and get them, they're not particularly cheap. It's not very affordable. You usually have to go out of your way. Sometimes the store you go to doesn't have them unless it's like a batteries and bulbs place. So I'm trying to circumvent all of that by just making this a mechanical camera. So that's my thought there. However, I did mention that there would be a meter, right? So how could that be? How can you make a camera with a meter without a battery? Are you going to do a selenium solar cell? No, I'm not. There's going to be a battery, but it's going to be right here, disguised as part of the grip, as seen in the Canon AL1, as seen in the Canon T50, as seen in the Canon T70. Konica FT1, that's another one. I never mentioned Konicas, but the Konica FT1 battery grip is really nice. So we'll do something like that. But this battery is going to be different. Not going to be AA, not going to be AAA, not going to be any of those other batteries I mentioned before that I'm not going to go back through because nobody wants to hear me do that again. It's going to be a rechargeable battery system, similar to the one that's seen in the new Polaroid cameras, where you can just kind of plug it in, have a USB-C port into the side here, and with a little flap that covers it. So that way it's a universal charging cord that you probably already have for your phone, your computer, what have you. That would be here in this little grip deal. Boom. That way it's a little bit more of an ergonomic design. Top of our camera. And again, this is not, I went to film school, okay, not drawing school. Some kind of grip like this, I'd have to go more into what ergonomics would look like. But the grip here, and then you could plug it in. So then we have our, whatever the front of the camera would look like here. We have our film rewind here, have the advance. So I've talked a lot about advance levers. I like certain ones, I dislike certain ones. There's a lot to it. There's a feel to it. There's the material that's put into it. You know, it's all kind of me just finding things to talk about. But I will say the best advance lever to date that I have ever used was the Nikon F3. The ball bearings used in the advance column make it so smooth. It just feels like you are kayaking through this clear, beautiful blue alpine lake somewhere. And the birds are singing, but it's this like quiet morning time. There's a few deer out on the edges of the lake, and you're just slowly kayaking through, gently sifting through the water in the calm stillness. That's what it feels like, and I want to replicate that feeling in this, where every time you advance it, you're like, wow, this feels like quality. The other thing that I want to steal, something similar to the LX's ASA dial here, kind of sits in the rewind lever here, and it has a locking mechanism for that. Honestly, I think this is one of the cleanest designs. It simplifies all of this into one stackable feature. So I would honestly just steal this. Like, I think that this is great, and steal it, you know? Wouldn't be stealing it necessarily. It would be more of borrowing or being heavily influenced by. I would be heavily influenced to use LX ASA dial. I'll put use in quotes. Use F3 advance. There's a meter. There's a battery. What's the on-off switch look like? I would not use the F3 on-off switch because I've seen oftentimes that gets shorted out, so I don't want to deal with that. Frankly, I don't know what the on-off switch would look like at this moment. but maybe some kind of like little toggle on the back, something kind of like embedded. So if we have the rear view of the camera here, advance shutter button here, maybe some little like switch here for an on off, because if you think about it, the on off doesn't necessarily need to be you can use the camera off just fine, but having this little embedded switch so it's not sticking out too far, you can just kind of toggle it over. That would be my thought, something kind of like that, maybe even on this side, just so that way you're not like thumbing it all the time. That actually might be the better bet, so something over there maybe. But then finally have a kind of display system up here for your light meter. And what I want to do with this one is I want to take, again, I'm just going to be stealing stuff because I think that that's the best way to do it, but you'd have your dial here for your shutter speeds, and you'd have an internal dial here like the MX, which would read out what shutter speed you're at and such like that. And then with your meter up here, it would just be a very simple like dot here or dot here, dot here, and like LEDs basically. So this would be like 2 stops off or under, 2 stops off or over on exposure. So you just would have to make your adjustments to meet that middle segment there. The other thing that I would probably want, if at all possible, would be either up here or down here. If you're looking through the viewfinder and the prism, there's a separate little part that lets you read out what aperture you're at. So I'd want to have a little aperture preview window there. So that way when you're looking through, you have your aperture, your shutter speed, and where you're kind of sitting in terms of exposure. I love that. It's not a digital readout, it's just exactly what's happening. It simplifies it. And then also when you take this off, all you have to worry about are these dots. And again, if you're kind of shooting at waist level, it's hard to see all the little things, like it's hard to see all the little stuff. So just having a very simple LED system would make that easier. And again, that would be fueled off of the battery there. Basically, the thought behind this would be that it is presenting all the fundamental components of older film cameras and modernizing them to a degree that makes it accessible for newer people, while also holding on to all of the pure simplicity that existed beforehand. That's why I wanted to utilize certain design systems that are in older cameras, certain features that I really admire and enjoy. That's kind of the meat and potatoes. The important stuff would be shutters. We have the more traditional and more classic cloth shutter. We have the more modern vertical traveling cobalt shutter, metal shutter, what have you. Everything in my heart says these make more sense. It's easier to achieve faster speeds with lighter weight blades. There's fewer components that are really required into this. It would basically be a housing unit here for the blades, and then that would be easy to work into all the different timings and stuff like that. So this would be easy, right? Versus, okay, it would look like something like that. This has the spools on either side. It has the larger timing system down there and also down there. Like, this is just not the most optimized, but it's the most traditional. Okay, guys, it's the most traditional. So we could do 2 things from this stage. We could utilize this system and do something similar to what the LX did, which is all of the faster speeds are mechanical. Up to, I think it is like 60. Everything's mechanical. Below that is electrical. So basically, if you don't have batteries in, you can't do slower speeds. I think maybe you can do bulb, but regardless. that would kind of mean you don't need this system here, which would work because, again, we have the cell down here. I would be tempted to work on that option there. The only exception to that issue is that I don't really want an automatic shutter speed. I don't. I want all manual shutter speed selections. That's kind of a contentious thought because a lot of people like the automatic. I love automatic. If I have a camera that has automatic, I will probably shoot on the automatic. But the problem is that I don't want to shoot on automatic. Like, I want this to be a thing that you're manipulating all of the different features all of the time to like reach optimal exposure or whatever, or give you the option to do that. And there's definitely a lot of people that are going to be watching this and be like, that's dumb, just don't shoot on auto, but have it so it's nice to have. So I'm willing to concede on that point, but for this stage in discussion or development or just bullshittery, I'm going to say no auto, okay? Top speed of 1/2000th of a second, because I think that's fast enough. And let's say all of the slower speeds are also electronically combined. So I'll make a slight amendment to this. I like the idea of that. And it wouldn't be necessarily a cloth shutter because maxing those out to 1/2000th of a second is very difficult, but it would be like one of the lighter weight titanium cloth shutters or something of that sort. So again, kind of getting into the weeds, but that would be my thought. These are nice. I like them a lot. They're easier to work on, I feel like. They take up a lot less room. But again, if we're talking about returning to kind of the fundamental nature of film photography, a horizontal traveling shutter is just, that's it, that's it. Because when you're advancing, you are feeling that movement. Again, it's like this nice movement all throughout, as opposed to this where you advance and it moves it up, which is nice, but it has the tendency to feel a little bit hollow, to feel a little vacuous, and I don't want that. I want this to be a very compact and very full-bodied system. This design would lend itself to that overall feeling. Definitely want to put like a flash sync points here and there, something like that. And then also there would be a hot shoe too. If there's a flash sync speed, there's going to need to be a hot shoe. No built-in flash, just basic kind of thing like that. With there being a hot shoe there and a detachable prism, obviously you're going to have contact points for there, but that's pretty easy to deal with. And then the prism detachment feature, whatever, pulley systems, you just tug on it to unlatch it, very similar to the F3. With the on-off here, there could be a little indication bar for where we're at in terms of the charging. So your 100%, 50%, 75, whatever percentile there. And if it is charging, have like a little system designed where it's like doing the do sort of thing. I'm trying to think if there's any other bases I didn't cover. Intake spool would be kind of a similar design to something more basic like the K1000 or like AE1 sort of thing. Very simple spool design with the gaps there. So you have to actually manually put the film in. I just don't like, and I don't really necessarily trust the quick loading features. I feel like something like this with the internal sprocket is easy. So this is like the bottom plate or whatever. We'd have the rewind switch sitting in kind of like an old embedded component there. On the back of the camera as well, memo slot. For sure, memo slot. I love a memo slot. I think they're great. I also really like the little bevel that's featured on the Super Program and the X700, X570 series of cameras. It's like a little thumb grip, so as you're kind of advancing, you have someplace to rest your thumb. As you're shooting, you have a little place for your thumb. I think that's really cool. Again, this is a very rough draw up, but that would be my thought there. Matching grips with a nice like plush feeling leather that's easy to hold on to. Relatively weatherproof system, not waterproof, but weatherproof would be kind of cool. It would be achieved with rubber sealants around all of the components that are fused together, the bottom plate, the top components, the camera body itself, and also, like I said, the rubber stopper over the battery charging port. Be designed for this to be taken out in the rain, or if it's in your bag and your bag gets wet, you don't have to worry about it too much. Obviously, you don't want to be taking this underwater. It would just be another peace of mind thing, something that means you can bring this to more events, bring this to more vacations, so on and so forth. So that way also when you're spending X amount of money on something like this, you're like, I'm getting my money's worth because it has the mount I want, it has all the features that I'm looking for, and it's a very standard modern film camera design. So what the price should be for something like this, I don't know, because again, I don't produce stuff, I don't know much about it, but I think something kind of in that, like, the Leica prices I think are a little bit high, and I don't think that this is something that can necessarily compete with a Leica because it's me talking about on my YouTube channel, but realistically I think something like this would probably be in the 800 to 900 to 1,000 range, which isn't like the cheapest thing in the world. Obviously it's not affordable, but again, if it's high quality, doesn't necessarily need to be all that affordable. And obviously I'm not trying to like cut people out of the market, but I think the idea behind this would be people are going to not care so much about the price if they're getting what they're looking for. And yeah, at the end of the day, people are going to complain about this, that, and the other, myself included, because you got to make content. But I think that this delivers on a lot of people's expectations of what a film camera should be, brings a lot to the table, is a system you can use for a long period of time. So at the end of the day, 800 to $1,000 or whatever would be a little bit more appropriate. And again, probably it would end up needing to be more than that or less. I don't know. I'm just speculating, but I think that if it was me, and if someone's like, hey, I have this camera, and it was to the T, or even some slight variation of that, and they're like, hey, got this camera, $950, would I buy that? I don't know. I really don't know, because as much as I love all these features, they all exist in other film cameras that I already have. And for $1,000, that's like Nikon F3 titanium kind of money. That's so many other cameras that I really want kind of money. To invest in something that you know nothing about is a little bit tricky. And that's where something like the Pentax or like the Leica pricing kind of gets an excuse, because Leica has a reputation of producing high quality cameras for professionals for X amount of years. Leica's also littered with problems, but for the most part, like, there's the Leica experience that people like. They're willing to pay that price for it. This would be some person in their basement, in their garage, building this. So who's to say how much that's actually worth? But if you slap name brand on it, then, you know, there's a little bit more notoriety. The price makes a little bit more sense. But even at that stage, still, we return to the component that there's so many other cameras on the market that do this thing, but, you know, maybe to a lesser degree or to a greater degree, for a little bit less of the price. So I think so much of it would have to do with the marketing of it, so much would have to do with intangible qualities of the camera, and the fact that film photography right now is just insanely expensive as it is. So dropping some serious money like this into an untested, untried camera is really a hard proposition. So I don't really know ultimately what a modern film camera looks like, but I think in this exercise I've kind of understood why Pentax made the decision they made, Mint Rolly's making the decision that they're making, so many other companies are making the decisions that they're making, which is appealing to this group a little bit more. I think that makes sense, but I think what a lot of these companies need to, mostly Pentax, is the room to grow method, because I think if you have enough room to grow with your system, then that can also appeal to this group as well, because they can see him at this stage in my film photography journey. I know that I like shooting at 5.6. I know I like taking landscapes at 11 because they have the sharpest detail, all this stuff. I can change different lenses on and off the camera so I can get different looks. Room to grow. The thought would be build one of these, make money, so then you can invest in something like this. And then you wouldn't have to have this right out of the gate price tag of $1,000 or whatever. I had this in my mind of like building a modern film camera, what would that look like? And this is the best I could really come up with. I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it was very long, and I know it's a lot of speculation, a lot of me just talking about mechanics, but I found it very enjoyable to talk through, and ultimately, I think that there is enough that I discussed in this video that can hopefully cultivate a better understanding of my approach to film cameras, and also hopefully give you something to talk about in the comments below in a constructive manner. What did you like about my design? What did you dislike? What would you change? What would you prefer? So on and so forth. I would love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them down below. I need to clean off my desk. It's looking a little bit messy. But again, I want to thank you all for watching. Appreciate it as always. Make sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Subscribe to the channel. Join the channel as well. Become a member. Would greatly appreciate that. And I will catch you on the next one.